So I know I'm not showing myself yet, but I will. I have no notes, no textbook, no nothing, just a sleeping dog and some Chipotle. So I'm gonna start off with anatomy. So this is your first rib, your right clavicle, left clavicle, your spinous processes, the body, intervertebral joint space, your transverse processes, your costovertebral joint articulation, your posterior ribs, your heart, shadow, your diaphragm, your right diaphragm, left diaphragm. I'm going to go into patient positioning. So how you want your patient positioned is either erect or supine on the table, and you would use a 40-inch SID. So you don't want your patient rotated. This patient is rotated, I can tell, because you want to look for equal distances of the clavicles from the spine. You want to see your SC joints. Your right clavicle on this patient is closer to the spine than the left. There's a great distance between the left clavicle and the spine. So the patient is positioned in an LPO. Also, another way to tell rotation on a T-spine is spinous processes should be going directly down the midline of the body. And they're not. The patient could have a little bit of scoliosis, but the patient is definitely rotated based off of the SC joints not being equal distance from the spine. Also, there is an artifact in this image. The patient still has their bra on, and it's obscuring T12's costovertebral articulation. So that's not good. That will take away from it being diagnostic, and that alone is a repeat. Also, the tech didn't use their marker. They used post-processing markers. Post-processing marker does not hold up in court. So if this image was brought to court for any reason, they wouldn't be able to use it because it's a post-processed marker. Also, we'll talk about centering. So the patient is centered at T6 instead of T7, where they should be centered at T7. You want to have from C7 to L1. L1 is cut off at the bottom of the body. So patient required anatomy isn't completely on there. If the patient was centered properly, they would easily have C7 to L1. Also, collimation you should keep it from top to bottom open to 17 inches because you're going to be doing this portrait. From side to side, you want about 8 inches from the spine from side to side, and it's opened way too much. I don't know how to do this with me in it because I can't flip it. So everyone's working, and this is the only way I could think to do this. So we're gonna start off with contrast. I don't believe this image has good contrast. You can't really see trabecular markings. You can somewhat see them from T1 to T3, but not very clear. And you lose all trabecular markings throughout the rest of the T-spine. Also, this image is very underexposed. For a T-spine, you want to have a short scale, high contrast, and this image has a lot of gray, so it's a long scale. Also, you can see that the lungs are pretty well exposed because you can see the lung markings, and the lungs should be pretty black when you're looking at this T-spine, and the T-spine itself should be very white and show good brightness. So let's go to brightness. I don't think this has good brightness because once again, up here it's okay. And when you get to mid T-spine, you lose all your detail and you lose your coracoid margins. So I don't believe this has good brightness. Also, you can see the heart shadow pretty prominent in this image, which takes away from the brightness and the detail and this contrast and the spatial resolution of the T-spine. So they definitely should have increased their technique to help with that. The spatial resolution also I don't think is very well demonstrated in this image, just because it's very underexposed and you can't see much detail. Right here is where you can start to see the intervertebral joint spaces. And on a T-spine, and an AP T-spine, they should be in profile all throughout. Also, this is demonstrated, another way to demonstrate rotation on the image, but also if they were penetrated correctly, it would help to be able to see them. You lose your spinous processes down the middle. This could also be due to exposure error. The lower T-spine definitely wasn't exposed properly. A way to fix that is you can increase your technique and use the anode heel effect, which is you put the thicker part underneath the cathode. So that could also help your image. Let's talk about required anatomy. All the anatomy that you want to see is from C7 to L1. L1 is slightly cut off, but if we're talking about required anatomy and you cut off L1, I personally wouldn't repeat it because of that, mainly because you're looking at the T-spine. If there was trauma also to the lower lumbar part of the spine, I would repeat that, but you're going to have overlap because you're most likely going to do a lumbar spine. But required anatomy is on there. Although it's on there, you can't see everything properly because it's underexposed. You want to be able to see your spinous processes, which obviously you can't because it's underexposed. Your intervertebral joint spaces aren't properly seen. You want to see costovertebral joint articulations. You should be able to see your posterior ribs a little bit better because the lungs absorbed the photons a lot better than the rest of the image. You can see the lung markings better than you can see like the detail and the trabecular markings throughout the ribs. So would I repeat this image based off of everything that I said? 100%. The main reason I would repeat, although it's not throughout the whole image, there is a bra wire on T12, which is obscuring the area of interest. Also, the patient is severely rotated into an LPO, and the overall exposure is not good. It's very underexposed. If I had the EIRS number, we'd be able to tell if it's in the diagnostic range. I would say it's not, just based on looking at the image. It has poor contrast, poor brightness, and poor spatial resolution. There's also motion on the image. Just overall, not a very good image. So I would definitely repeat.